Hello, I'm Eddie Morris, Consultant Gynaecologist at the Norfolk and Norwich University Hospitals NHS Trust and President of the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynaecologists.
Hello, I'm Janet Fyle. I'm a midwife and professional policy advisor at the Royal College of Midwives.
Could you please explain to us what a hymen is?
The hymen is a thin piece of skin, sometimes referred to as a membrane, that partially covers the vagina and forms part of the vulva. The hymen is perforated. This means it has very small holes in it to allow for menstruation. The hymen can break during sex, but this is not always the case. In many cases, the hymen is broken through activities like sport or through using tampons.
Is everyone born with a hymen?
No, not everyone is born with a hymen. Some women are born with a very small hymen or no hymen at all. A very small number of women are also born with what's called an imperforate hymen. This means their hymen has no openings and it can require minor surgery so that women are able to bleed during their period.
How does a hymen relate to whether or not you're considered a virgin then?
It does not. We're clear that whether or not a hymen is intact cannot be used as an indication that a woman has had vaginal intercourse. An intact hymen does not mean the sexual intercourse has not occurred, as a hymen can stretch to accommodate penetration. It is entirely normal for parts of the hymen, what we call hymenal remnants, to remain after vaginal intercourse and even after a woman has given birth.
Is this the view of all medical experts?
The fact that an intact hymen is not a reliable indicator for whether or not someone has had vaginal intercourse or is considered a virgin is not only agreed by the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynaecologists and the Royal College of Midwives in the UK, it is also recognized across the medical field, including by the World Health Organization, WHO.
What is virginity testing?
From a medical viewpoint, there's no known examination which can determine whether a woman or girl has had vaginal intercourse. The harmful practice of virginity testing has no scientific merit. So-called virginity testing is an examination of the female genitalia. It looks to determine whether a woman or girl has had vaginal intercourse by an examination to establish whether or not she has an intact hymen. It is also sometimes referred to as a two-finger test. There is no clinical indication that a woman has or has not had vaginal intercourse that relates to the presence of a hymen.
What is a hymenoplasty?
Hymenoplasty is a procedure undertaken to reconstruct a hymen. It is also sometimes referred to as hymen repair or hymen reconstruction. A hymenoplasty is undertaken with the intended purpose of allowing a woman to bleed the next time she has vaginal intercourse, in order to give the impression that her hymen was intact and she therefore has no sexual history. There are a number of different techniques to achieve the reconstruction of a hymen: creating scar tissue in the vagina, or suturing remnants of the hymen together at the vaginal opening, or surgically reconstructing the hymen using any other method. In some very limited circumstances, there are procedures that are clinically necessary that could be construed as a hymen repair despite not meeting the definitions outlined by the RCOG and in the guidance produced alongside the new legislation to ban this procedure. This could be when, due to damage caused by external trauma or during another medical or surgical procedure, there is a clinical need to repair hymenal remnants to prevent bleeding, infection or discomfort to a woman. There are also procedures to treat an imperforate hymen to allow menstrual blood to escape, and this is an entirely different procedure with a specific clinical need. Virginity testing and hymenoplasty are forms of violence against women and girls and are often associated with honour-based abuse, which will be covered by safeguarding experts later in this webinar.
Does hymenoplasty allow a woman to bleed the next time she has vaginal intercourse?
No. It is a myth that a woman will always bleed when her hymen is broken. The hymen is a membrane with relatively few blood vessels that are unlikely to cause significant bleeding, and studies have documented that bleeding is not routinely observed after first vaginal intercourse. Therefore, the whole perceived purpose of a hymenoplasty procedure is undermined. It is possible that it will not allow a woman to bleed following intercourse to give the impression she has no history of vaginal intercourse.
Are healthcare professionals currently undertaking virginity tests and hymenoplasty on women? Where are these practices taking place?
Yes, we know that some healthcare professionals do offer both virginity testing and hymenoplasty services. We also understand that both procedures, but mainly virginity testing, is also undertaken in the community and not by healthcare professionals. When undertaken by healthcare professionals, these practices are undertaken in private clinics. Although it is not possible to say how many virginity testing or hymenoplasty procedures had been undertaken each year, because private clinics do not have to report this, there is evidence they were taking place and demand was increasing.
What does the new law on virginity testing and hymenoplasty mean?
Later in this webinar, legal experts involved in developing the legislation will provide a detailed summary of the new legal offences of offering hymenoplasty or virginity testing. Once this law has been passed, it will be an offence to offer or undertake either virginity testing or hymenoplasty procedures, or to advertise these procedures. Healthcare professionals and other professionals working across the public sector have a responsibility to safeguard women and girls who are at risk of undergoing virginity testing or hymenoplasty.
What is the harm to women of these practices?
There are some physical risks associated with hymenoplasty as a procedure. These include infection, acute bleeding during the procedure, scarring, and narrowing of the opening of the vagina, with reduced sensation or increased sensation, and sexual difficulties. However, it's the psychological harms which are most acute and concerning with both these practices. Psychological risks of virginity testing and hymenoplasty include depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, reduced or no libido, and in some cases suicide. In addition to the direct harms caused by these procedures, the availability and now historic legality of these procedures enforce myths and attitudes about the concept of virginity, which are incorrect and can place women at risk. The relationship between these procedures and forms of violence against women and girls is further explored later in this webinar.
Eddie, could you tell us why you think the change in the law is important?
This change of law is essential to send a clear message that there is no place in the medical world for these harmful practices. Women deserve the right to have ownership over their own sexual and reproductive health, and the ban on virginity testing and hymenoplasty is essential in ensuring we live in a country where this is always the case.
Janet, the same question to you. Why do you think the change in the law is important?
This change in the law is important because virginity testing and hymenoplasty are completely incompatible with the ethics of any society claiming human rights and equality between men and women. Our society cannot tolerate this harmful practice, which is aimed solely at girls and women. It is a deeply humiliating and intrusive examination that violates human rights. This law will protect girls and women and challenge the excuses made to justify this abuse.
Virginity is a patriarchal creation used to control and devalue women. The concept of virginity rationalises a wider agenda to control female sexuality, and it's been used for centuries as a tool for control. Virginity itself has no real medical or scientific meaning, and on this basis it's clinically impossible to test or check a person's virginity. But sadly, this is not the message that young women and girls are receiving. I, like many girls, grew up thinking that the hymen was a sign of virginity, receiving messages in many different ways through school, peers and relatives that good women waited until marriage before having sex and that bad, immoral women did not wait. What's more was that there was always an air of discomfort when talking about sex and female body parts, which I then learned to avoid talking about, to avoid uncomfortable conversations. What this has meant for me personally was that there were many female anatomical body questions that were unanswered, and many harmful myths that were handed down to me unchallenged. It took me as an adult to do my own research to really understand how this popular story of virginity that I had been led to believe was true was in fact not the case. The biggest myth that many women and girls own is that sexual purity is valuable and preferred, and conversely, that anyone who isn't a virgin is impure and worthless. Not only is this not true, but this idea is really dangerous for women and girls. In honour-based patriarchal societies, young women and girls are expected to not have sex until they're married. And if this expectation is not met, the consequences can be detrimental. At Nirvana, we often hear about the virginity of young girls and women being controlled in three main ways. Firstly, many women and girls are expected to demonstrate their virginity after consummating their marriage on their wedding, and this can include having to show a bloody sheet as evidence of their virginity. Secondly, it can be controlled via a virginity test or a check, which can take place at home, but it can also take place in a Harley Street clinic. We've supported girls who have been rumoured to have been in contact with a boy, and a virginity check or a test has then been required to safeguard and protect not only the honour of that girl, but also the reputation of her family. The third way of controlling female virginity is through hymen surgery. We've supported women who are coerced by societal pressures to have this invasive surgery. We've also supported women and girls who have been forced to have this surgery by family members. At Nirvana, we often hear about women who are terrified. We hear from them that they're petrified of the consequences of their family and prospective husbands finding out that they're not a virgin, and this includes from victims of sexual abuse and victims of rape. On our helpline, we had one caller explain that she felt like she was walking into her own funeral, knowing that she would fail the test as a victim of rape. Women or girls contacting our helpline talk about fearing ostracism and in some cases fearing that they may be killed because they have had or are just perceived or believed to have had sexual intercourse. The concept of virginity and the harmful practices of virginity testing and hymenoplasty associated with virginity are clear forms of violence against women and girls. Women and girls who are coerced by societal pressures linked to virginity often experience other behaviours that discriminate, harm or abuse them. In our experience, this includes other forms of honour-based abuse such as forced marriage. We believe that every woman deserves the right to make any decision about her body, free from shame, free from stigma or discrimination, and without pressure to subscribe to gender-based societal norms and without fear of harm. The concept of virginity is not medical or scientific. Instead, it's a social and cultural construct. We need to reset harmful perceptions linked to virginity that perpetuate violence against women and girls. We need to do this for women and girls through education, through school and empowerment and support. We know that many women and girls do not come forward to report, with many not recognising that this is a form of abuse. But since starting the campaign and since the government's commitment to ban virginity testing and hymenoplasty, we've had significant increased contacts to our helpline. Challenging harmful myths linked to virginity enable potential people going through this to understand that this is abuse, this is control, rather than it being rooted in some medical merit. A woman's virginity is not important, it doesn't matter, and it does not define who she is. What is more important and what should be spoken about is choice and consent.
Virginity testing is now a criminal offence under the Health and Care Act 2022. Some people already thought that virginity testing was a crime, but in fact it wasn't. You see, the Female Genital Mutilation Act 2003, later amended in 2015, did not criminalise or specifically criminalise virginity testing. That focused more on the mutilation and the excision of women's genitalia. And so campaigners such as myself and many others that you'll hear from argued that we need a specific criminal offence, virginity testing, to make the law absolutely clear and ensure that there is no lacuna and loophole which allows virginity tests to be carried out up and down the country. So what are the key elements of the new virginity testing offences? Well, first is the definition of virginity testing. It's the examination of female genitalia with or without a girl or woman's consent. You see, the consent of a woman or girl doesn't matter, it's irrelevant, it's not a defence. And we know that the purpose, or the so-called purpose of performing these tests, is to determine if a girl or woman is actually a virgin, although of course there's no health or medical necessity for carrying out these types of examinations. And so we know that within law, again, that cannot be any defence to the performing of virginity tests, in inverted commas. The second element of the offence is that the Act makes it an offence for anyone to carry out virginity testing in the UK. So it doesn't matter who that person is, it's a crime. And it's also made it clear that it's a criminal offence for a UK national or a habitual resident of the UK to carry out virginity testing anywhere else in the world outside of the UK. So, for example, if a medical doctor, a British medical doctor, a UK national or a habitual resident were to travel abroad, say Spain for instance, and perform virginity testing there, and they would then return back to the UK, that would be a crime. Merely carrying out the virginity testing abroad does not mean that you somehow escape the full force of the law. The police will investigate that criminal offence and may even pursue to the Crown Prosecution Service. There may be a prosecution and subsequently a conviction. So it certainly doesn't matter if it's carried out in this country or abroad. Similarly, a victim of the testing does not need to be a UK national or a habitual resident. The fact that they are a victim of this form of virginity testing, in inverted commas, that is enough. The third element of the offence is offering a virginity test. So just the offering of that, even if it hasn't been performed, is going to be a criminal offence. And the idea is to be able to prevent someone from undergoing this testing so that potential victims can be protected in the future. And it's knowing that these types of tests are being advertised, are being offered, and certainly are being performed in some instances. The fourth element of the offence is that the Act makes it an offence to aid and abet the carrying out of virginity tests. So if someone is supporting virginity tests being carried out, they will be culpable. They will face the full force of the law. And this is aimed at preventing family members from arranging the testing of women and girls or assisting with it. For example, by accompanying the woman or girl to the test or even arranging the test for them. If they've been complicit, they've been aiding and abetting the carrying out of the virginity test, then they will be prosecuted. So what are the key headline points to take away? If you take nothing else away, this is what you should remember. First of all, virginity testing is a criminal offence in all 4 nations. England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. In the UK, it is a crime and it will not be tolerated. Number 2, there are 3 offences of virginity testing. Firstly, carrying out virginity testing. That is a crime. If anyone carries it out, then they are caught within the Act. 2, offering a virginity test. Even if it's not performed, if a virginity test is offered and it's suggested that it's publicly available and they can carry it out, that is a criminal offence. Number 3, aiding and abetting the carrying out of a virginity test. So if a family member accompanies someone to a clinic or a so-called clinic to carry out a virginity test, if they book the appointment They will be caught within this act and they could be prosecuted. The next headline point, the third key point to take away, is that this is an extraterritorial offence. So what does that mean? If a person is a UK national or a habitual resident in any of those 4 nations in the UK, but they travel outside of the jurisdiction to Spain, to Ethiopia, to any other country, and they perform virginity testing, then an offence may have been committed. They could be caught within the legislation. The final key thing to take away on that point is that the offence may be tried in the Magistrates' Court or the Crown Court, and the offences will carry a maximum penalty of 5 years imprisonment, a custodial sentence, and/or an unlimited fine. One will face the full force of the law if virginity testing is carried out. It's a violation of a woman and girl's right to bodily integrity, and perpetrators will be brought to justice.
Hi, I'm Naomi Wiseman, and I'm going to be talking to you today about the new hymenoplasty offences that have been introduced by the Health and Care Act 2022. Just to give you a little bit of background, I've helped the coalition of organisations that have worked so hard to bring about this change in the law, to draft and look at what we wanted from the law and from the new offences. So it is really monumental that we've managed to achieve this. But I'd like to take you through the 3 new hymenoplasty offences that are contained within the new Act. Because when we're delivering training and when we are dealing with frontline workers, it's really important that we all understand exactly what the new law says, exactly what is an offence, and I think more importantly, what maybe isn't an offence or what's not included in the new legislation. So the hymenoplasty offences are found at sections 147 to 158 of the Health and Care Act. We've not reproduced them here. If you want to have a look at them, then we'll be providing a link to the Act itself. The reason that the clauses are quite extensive is because it's what's called a 4-nation offence, which means it's an offence in England and Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland. Because of the way our legal system works, therefore, we've had to draft 3 different sets of offences, 1 for England and Wales, 1 for Scotland, and 1 for Northern Ireland. But what's important is that the 3 offences that are included are the same in all 4 jurisdictions. So just to start with, how hymenoplasty has been defined in the Act. And how it has been defined is very simply that it's the reconstruction of the hymen with or without consent. Now, what's quite important about that is the with or without consent, because a huge issue around this has been whether or not practitioners who were undertaking these procedures were actually obtaining proper medical consent. And there was certainly a feeling amongst campaigners that it wasn't really possible to give proper consent to a procedure like this. Now, what the law is now saying is that it is not a defence for someone to believe that the person was consenting to this procedure. And so you're taking the onus off of the alleged victim and you're putting it onto the professional or the practitioner who is doing the procedure. That's quite important in my view in terms of the dynamic of showing who it is bears the responsibility for not committing this offence. Now, as I've already said, this is an offence that applies in all 4 nations within the United Kingdom, but also I think of real relevance is that it is an extraterritorial offence as well. So if you are a United Kingdom national, or you are habitually resident in England or Wales or Scotland or Northern Ireland, but you travel outside the jurisdiction, then the offence effectively carries with you. And those of you who are aware of the FGM laws and the forced marriage laws will recognise this. And so the extraterritorial application exists in this legislation as well. Now, just looking at the three offences, and again, I think it's very important to break them down so we're all aware of exactly who will be potentially criminally culpable. The first is to carry out hymenoplasty, and this is the law that would apply to a doctor or a medical professional, or in fact anyone, so it doesn't have to be someone who's medically qualified, who attempts to perform the surgical procedure of reconstructing a hymen. Now, there is no definition of that individual. It is a person who carries out hymenoplasty. So that's very important. So it can be anyone who attempts to reconstruct a hymen. And that could be in a non-medical setting, certainly not having to be someone who's able to use anaesthetic or medical procedures. So that's very important. The second offence is the offence of offering to carry out hymenoplasty. Now, this is also, I think, a very important offence to have included, because the carrying out of the hymenoplasty could be potentially quite difficult to prove. It certainly may require the alleged victim, person who's undergone the procedure, to themselves have to produce evidence that might require potentially invasive investigations to prove that hymenoplasty has been carried out. Now, the offer to do the hymenoplasty means that even if there is a conversation where you're meeting with someone who says, we can do this for you, even if the procedure is then described as something else, or if it's put in as something else, if that conversation has happened where the offer to perform hymenoplasty is made, then a criminal offence may have been committed. This will also mean that clinics can no longer advertise this procedure, and they can no longer use middle people, if you like, who try to kind of link doctors to people looking for this procedure. And that's quite important because it will shut down the ability to pull clients in, if you like. And so that's the offence of offering to carry out hymenoplasty. And then the third offence, which is the most widely drafted one, is the offence of aiding or abetting a person to carry out hymenoplasty. And this is the offence that's most likely to capture potentially family members who may be putting pressure on someone to undergo this procedure. That if you seek to try to find someone to do this procedure, and that may be approaching a clinician who doesn't in fact advertise these services, that you would like this procedure done, then you will also be captured and have potentially committed a criminal offence. And so those are the three offences that are laid out in the new Act. So just to reiterate, the headline points for hymenoplasty are that it is a four nations offence, which means it is an offence in England and Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland. There are three offences that are set out in the legislation. There is the carrying out of hymenoplasty, the offering to carry out hymenoplasty, and if a person aid, abets, counsels or procures the carrying out of hymenoplasty. The offences are extraterritorial if the person is a UK national or habitually resident in any of the 4 nations, but travels outside of the jurisdiction, either to perform or procure hymenoplasty, then an offence may have been committed. Hymenoplasty is quite narrowly defined for the purpose of the Act. It is the reconstruction of the hymen. It does not go beyond that. And so where I think as practitioners, particularly if you are working in a safeguarding role, have to be live to other procedures that may still be offered either by clinics or in backstreet services, which are part of what we know to be described as re-virginization packages, such as laser treatments that are designed to tighten the vagina, labiaplasty. These are all so-called cosmetic procedures that have not been banned by this legislation, but they may themselves be safeguarding red flags. And therefore, if you become aware of someone who is being pressured to undergo that kind of procedure, or is seeking to procure that sort of procedure because of fears around not being perceived to be a virgin, then they can be, in my view, safeguarding red flags that we still need to be live to, but they would not be offences necessarily as captured under the hymenoplasty offences.